Welcome to the Elokus podcast. This is class number 8 in the discourse, in the 8th discourse of the book Pesha Shehegdima. This is the class number 8 in the discourse Mimana Afar Yakov, which is the 8th discourse in the book Pesha Shehegdimu 5672. This is the third class in chapter 30. And here today's class, we're going to conclude after we went through in this discourse, explaining the first two stages of the emergence of the Sphirot of the lights, the Or Pnimi, the internal light, how the original state is when it's still in its source, and then the second state of the light is when the light emerges, but has not yet vested in vessels. And then finally, we're now going to learn about the third stage, when the light does go into vessels. In the first state, the lights are in a state of antuchad, they're totally one, and they are pashut, they essentially are simple, because they're completely one with the Ein Sof. In the second state, they already divide, the 10 sphirot are already in a state of division, and then each one is already what it is. However, they're still undetectable or unexperienced as, or inexperienced as separate powers. They look all the same because they're still connected to their source, and the source from where they come from, which is the Esesphiris Agnuzais, was Pashut, and therefore the Pshitus, the simplicity of it, extends even to this level, and that's the reason why it's called Esesphiris Belima, without a substance. That means even though there are 10, and there's Chachma, Bina, Das, and Chesed, Gevuret, Feres, Netzach, Hod, Yisod, Malchus, which are the 10 Sphirot, all of these Sphirot are not yet definable, confinable to their particular name. And as he brought out that Chachma, the level of Chachma, while it's still in this level, like in the level of Keser, Chachma, when it's still above the Islapshus and the Kalim, the enclosement in the vessels, is not even called Chachma. We wouldn't even know it as Chachma, as he referred to it as Lav Chachma Yediyah. It's not a knowledgeable Chachma. Here is where the Spheros are now going to start taking on real image, real definition. And we started learning just one line yesterday, and now we're going to continue. Madrega Gimel on the third level, these are the lights that become invested in the vessels. They already grasped and they become literally enclosed, invested in the vessels. And the light, when it goes into the vessel, becomes like the vessel. If you remember, all the way in the beginning of the book, we were learning how the powers of the soul, when they go into the limbs, they become limb-like. If you remember, we were talking about Or Pnimi becomes very assimilated and integrated and unified with the vessel. We gave the example how the intelligence of the soul, when it's not in a body, is completely different than the intelligence of a soul when it's enclosed in a body. So it's like a complete different level of intelligence. Or the power of vision that's in the soul prior to the soul entering into a body and seeing physicality, its power of vision in the spiritual world is utterly different. And that is because when a light vests itself in a vessel, it becomes like the vessel. So that's what he's saying over here. It becomes kefima husakelim, like the substance of the vessel. And therefore, the chachma of the vessel, without a question, that the 10 sphirot, as they are in the tzilim, as they are in Atzilus, in the world of emanation, the kalim are definitely defined with definitions. Chesed is chesed, and it's not gevura. Kindness is kindness, and it's not discipline. And so in each sphira, once the light goes into the vessels, the lights also become that way. So this is very important to understand, this is unlike the Ramak, because Ramosha Cordova, the Ramak, who's actually his yard site is today. Oh, so holy Ramosha Cordova, let's mention him. The Ramak's opinion is that the lights are completely pshutim. The lights never become mitziyorim. The lights never ever get image, get color. And the Ramak's mashal for the oires and kalim is that the lights only shine in the vessel, and since the vessel has a color, so the light has a color. The example the Ramak gives is when you put water into a green vessel, the water looks green, and when you put water into a red glass, the water looks red, but the water remains always the same clear color, and it's not green, and it's not red, or it's not yellow. It doesn't have any of these colors. So the Ramak is of the opinion that the lights are utterly pashut, and that's so according to Ramak, it's all the way through, even when the light is in the Orin Sof, and then when the light comes out and travels through the kav, and when the light finally fills the vessel, the light remains always pashut. Because if you remember, according to Ramak, at the essence of these lights in the Ein Sof, there is no Esses Viris. It's only one. The Esses Viris Agnuzais, according to the Ramak, is only in the vessels. The vessels are Esses. Is the shorish of the vessels, not the shorish of the lights. But we are following right now the Arizal, and according to the Holy Ari, the lights, even when they are embedded in the Ein Sof, they have already a subtle beginning of Esses Viris, to the fact that they're all one then, and they're all unified, but this is already the shorish of the light. It's called Esses Viris Agnuzais, and this potential coloring in the light becomes more pronounced when the light is emanated in the kav, but then it's still pashut because the source is still pashuting it, making it simple. But once they land in the vessels, then the lights become like the vessels. The vessels really do a job on the light. But the reason the vessel is able to do a job on the light is, as we're still going to learn, he's going to say in chapter 32, we're in chapter 30 now. Chapter 32 is going to begin that it's not only due to the vessel that the lights have this character. It's not like when the light goes into the vessels taint the light. No, what the vessels do is they bring out the hidden notes that are in the light. The light itself has it. And that's, again, all only fits according to the Shita of the Arizal, according to the opinion of the Ari that we are following. Okay. It becomes like the substance of the kelim, which is completely different than the light when the light was not in the vessels. So light, and now the light becomes like the vessel. Just like the light of intelligence, once it goes into the physical gray matter of the head, it means once it interacts with the human physical brain, what happens? To now produce a physical idea. Idea meaning as it's being understood in the physical realm. Which you can't compare it in any way to the intelligence and the grasping that's in the soul itself, prior to it engaging with the physical vessel with the brain. Or remember when we were using the examples of Shammai and Hillel, I mentioned it yesterday as well, that Shammai and Hillel, Shammai used to think through the prism of discipline, and Hillel would think through the prism of kindness. So once the ideas came into their heads, the concept itself was tainted with kindness in Hillel's mind, and tainted with discipline and with gevura, with might and strength in Shammai's head. But both of them received it from a teacher. And Shammai and Avtalian's teachings were still above the kindness and severity of Shammai and Hillel. So the teaching was really abstract. So what he's saying is, for our purpose of our discussion over here, Shmaya Naftalion's Torah study, their teachings are on the level of light prior to investment in vessels. Hillel and Shammai is already the light coming into the vessel. So since the wiring of Hillel's brain, his kalim, his vessels, were chesed, were wired in a chesed, in a kind manner, and the wiring of Shammai's brains, the cells of his brain were wired to be more gevuridig. So once that abstract ideas, which the abstract idea has hidden notes of kindness and severity already in it, when it goes into Hillel's brain, Hillel brought forth that in Hillel's understanding. And Shammai will pick up on the subtle notes of Gevura and turn that into a major piece of the entire understanding. Now, of course, Shammai and Naphtalian also have a physical brain. But he's saying, compared to Hillel and Shammai's mind is considered already oiros in Kalim, in as much that Hillel is chesed and Shammai is Gevura. And Shammai and Naphtalian are still pre these emotions. So it's pure intelligence higher than these emotions, and therefore it would serve the example as stage number 2, where the oir is above the keli. What he was trying to say over here is that once the oir lands in the keli now changes the oir. And the same is also oiros keshehem bahakelim, when the lights go into the vessels, then the lights become already muhus, substance, and they become something. See, the second stage, he said earlier, that it is bepchenes metzios nikeres. It's in some kind of recognizable metzios, but it's not a metzios davar. It's not a substance yet. In order for it to become a substance, to become something, it only when it goes into kalim does it become a something of red, or a something of green, or a something of blue, and so forth. It becomes already the light of wisdom, when it goes into the vessels of chachma. And the light of chesed when it goes into the vessels of chesed. And it becomes the light of discipline or might when it goes into the vessels of gevura. And that would be like when it goes into Shammai's vessel. And this is what we were saying earlier. And it's not that the light remains free, it's just that it's flowing through a vessel, so the vessel has color. No, the light, that's what the idea of or pnimi means. The or pnimi means that the light and the vessel get married to each other, and that they rub off on each other, that the vessel itself changes the light. That's the idea. It's not only that it appears as if the light is colored, that it appears so, like the color of the keli, like again would be the shita saramak, but rather that it becomes real kindness and real gevura b'pchinas mitzius, in a state of mitzius. So much so, he says something really interesting. Ad, to the point, now, if you want to change the nature of the light once it went into the vessel, the light had already acquired the tainting of the vessel. It's almost like the light became dyed according to the dye of the vessel. But again, the reason why the light could become dyed in that color is because subtly the light has already the potential to being dyed that way. So it's important to understand that. If the lights would be utterly pashut, like the Ramak says, then no dye in the world would be able to work on them. The vessels would not be able to affect them. It's because, according to the Arizal, the lights themselves begin as esespheres agnuzais, and that is already a potential. So therefore, when it goes into the vessels really change the light. Now, what does he say? In order to undo that, you really need to nullify the light. What does that mean? The light has to be canceled in something bigger than itself for it to be able to undress itself from the dressing that it got. What it means is like this, that the light that has entered into the light of chesed is not unredeemable. That it's from now on locked and loaded into chesed and can never, ever, ever be freed again and be tainted with gevura. The light can undress itself to a certain degree, but in order for the light to do that, the light can't shake itself free on its own, because the light has already become imprisoned by kindness. When I say imprisoned, I mean it became locked into kindness. To undo that, Hashem has to shine onto these lights. Let's say once the light of the Or Ein Sof went into the vessel of Chesed, and now God wants to change the nature. He says, oops, too much kindness, let's pull it out quickly. In order to undo that effect of the light of Chesed that went into Chesed, Hashem could undo it, but you know what he needs to do? The light itself, he can't tell the light to shake it off. The light itself is already acquired and fixed with the notes of Chesed. In order to undo it, Hashem has to overwhelm that light with a higher light of Ein Sof. Hashem has to stun the light with a higher light. What that does is it nullifies the character of when somebody stands in front of somebody that is much bigger than him, it becomes nullified. That nullification can cancel the algorithm or the definitions that were planted on it, can cancel it and retract the light and put it back into a place where it's still pashut, and then it can acquire a different color. So it's like you need to bleach it. He can bleach it. What's bleach? Bleach is very intense, so you can undo the color. Now, where do you even see something like that once light went into a certain vessel that it can change? So remember, we had a whole discussion about that many chapters ago. We discussed the idea that there is a concept called achlifu dichtayo, that there are times that the energies that are in chesed switch over and they become energies of gevura, and the energy that was in the vessel of gevura switch over and go back to the energy of chesed. And if you don't remember yet that concept, I'll remind you now. Remember, we said that Hillel and Shammai can have studied a concept, and Hillel walked out being very lenient, and which is the nature of kindness, which is expected. So Shammai walked out being very, very strict from that very same class, because he's taking it to the side of gevura. And yet we learned that both of them can come back to their teacher, and they can relearn the same concept again. And then, unlike their characteristics, Hillel can walk out after he's already originally understood it earlier in a kind way. Hillel can then come out feeling very strict with a lot of rigidity in his mind. And Shammai can be, hey, you know what? Maybe we can be lenient. Like we do find sometimes that Shammai was lenient and Hillel was strict. Now, what is the chiddush over here that we learned then was, it's not only a new class that they never learned, and Hillel might walk out strict and Shammai might walk out lenient, but even when they already understood it one way, but then they can change positions. And yesterday Shammai was saying like this and Hillel was saying like that. Today they have a complete change of mind or a change of heart, and Hillel is seeing it this way and Shammai is seeing it that way. How does that happen? Because you see, the energy can change. Okay, but in order for which would seem to imply that the lights did not become really dyed. If they would really become dyed by the kalim, if it really became colored by the vessel, how can they be undone? But the answer is they really can't be undone. The only way they can be undone is they get bleached. What's the bleaching? That they need to come back and let's talk about Hillel and Shammai. Hillel and Shammai need to go back to Shema and Avtalion. When they go back to Shema and Avtalion, their teachers, and they hear their class over again, the only way is if Shammai and Avtalion blow their minds completely. Because when they stand in front of Shammai and Naphtali, they become so nullified by the brilliance, by the mind-blowing new insight or whatever. And suddenly that knocks their socks off. In this case, it knocks their brains out. It knocks the chesed out from Hillel, the limitation of kindness from Hillel's mind, and the limitation of strictness from Shammai's mind, because they're baffled by this pure abstraction of light, this powerful light that is above. It cancels them both, brings them back to the table, and that can cause them suddenly to walk out in an opposite side of the table, on the opposite side of things. So what do you see from here? The reason why they need to go back to their source is because because the energy also became tainted already. And as we say, the only way it can be canceled is it has to be exposed to the Or Ein Sof. And an example. Let's bring it up into the metaphor. The lights of Atzilus could be switched, but they need to be treated with a heavy dose of light, a far greater light than they usually get, which stuns them, silences the Sfirot. The Sfirot become as if they become muted. They become, what we call it, overwhelmed and abnegated. And then you can refresh the energy. You can hit the refresh page, and suddenly these lights take on a whole new form. And this concept is what the sages say, that in order to have peace in the spiritual realms above, there are the archangels of Michael and the archangel of Gabriel, which are the total opposites. The same like Shammai and Hillel. Michael, the archangel Michael, is very kind, and the archangel full of love, and the archangel Gabriel is full of discipline and fear and intensity. And they really should burn each other. How do they get along with each other? God keeps on stunning them with lights, with a higher revelation, and they melt in front of this revelation, and that's how they can work in harmony one with each other, and they're not destroying each other, because they're constantly nullified by something bigger than them. So there we're talking about getting along. Here we're talking about more than getting along. Not just getting along, but that sometimes Gabriel will behave like Michael, and Michael will behave like Gabriel. That's kind of the idea. But again, the only way to do that is God has to stun them with a higher light. Now, this is what makes stage number 3 different than stage number 2. In stage number 2, the lights of Chesed and Gevura are so abstract that, as remember, I gave the example. And for one moment you see it as Chesed, a moment later you don't see the kindness anymore. You're lost. You lost that sense. And so on that level, it doesn't take a higher power to change it. It goes in and out of Chesed on its own, because it's very, very fluid. It's very not rigid. It's very not fixed yet. Because the light is, before it went into vessels, it's completely free. Once it goes into vessels, it literally does become fixed and tainted because of the vessel. And now it takes already a major surgery to undo it, a major bleaching. That's what we're learning over here. So let's see over here. Ad, so much so, in order for them to have bittul, and integration, they should work with each other. And even more than that, they should switch positions. This can only happen and only when they have a revelation of a higher light, when God treats the Sfirot to a revelation of Keser, for instance. When Keser reveals itself, Keser is infinite light, to the Sfiros, they suddenly become nullified, and they all get along with each other, they're all surrendered to each other, they're all, and they can switch. Similar to what it says, Hamshalo Pachad Imoy, the dominion and dread is with him. He makes peace in his heights. So it says that God made, and the sages say that this is referring to the peace that God makes between the angels above that are completely opposite from each other and should be antagonistic to each other. God keeps them in harmony. Oisa Shalom. But it says he has to make peace. And in the beginning of the verse, it explains how he makes peace in them. It says, Ham Shalu Pachad. He dreads them with his dread. He overwhelms them, and they become, and it gives the example of two ministers and a king in a government that can never get along with each other because each one of them has their ideas and they clash with each other. They have to come in front someone that is, they have to, only when the king walks in, and because his power is so much greater than theirs, and they stand like this, they're screaming over each other. They don't even talk. They can't. But suddenly they're silent. And in their silence, he can kind of bring them to the table to interact with each other and work in harmony. So this idea, which it says about the angels, he says, really, in truth, is not only about the angels, it's even in the attributes of Atzilus, which is a much higher level, infinitely higher, because it's not the angels are creations. And Atzilus is still the level of the divine. So we might think that in Atzilus, the characteristics are so the definitions are so light, they're not yet defined. Maybe you don't need this. So he's going to prove that even in Atzilus we need, once they go into vessels, the vessels already create true character in the light, that to undo it needs something very intense. What did it say? Just say the archangel Michael, who's the minister of water, and the archangel Gabriel, they get along with each other. They do not extinguish each other. For this, they need to have a higher light that shines upon them. The angels, even though he's saying, he said, maybe it's not such a good example, because they were talking about angels. Angels are really fixed. They're creations. Creations are really fixed. But the emanations of God, that's still divine. It's still part of the infinite, right? So he says no, because the angels, even though they're in the world of creation, Sharshan, their root was Ma'or v'Kelim d'Atzilus. It's on the light and the vessels of Atzilus. As it says in the Siddur, means the Siddur of the Alter Rebbe, in the portal of Shema, the Nefesh de Malachim Sharsha Ma'oris d'Atzilus, that the soul of the angels are rooted in the lights of Atzilus. And since we say by the angels that it requires a higher power to bring them together, so too applies to their source as well. And their integration, that they can even work with each other, and especially to even switch over to the other side, it's through a light that's higher than both of them. The key over here is that this nullifies them. But what is that telling you? If you don't nullify them and you let them be as they are in their consciousness, then they are set in their ways and they're unbudgeable. How do you shake them up? By overwhelming them and nullifying them. So what does this say regarding? So this tells you how the lights have already become fixed. Become a mitzios. It's become something already. To undo it, you need to nullify it. And the same as Batzilus, in Atzilus. The lights that go into vessels, which are in a level of kindness and severity, in order that they should have bittul and integration, why they are ha'elyon dafka. There is a higher light. The oiros themselves that go into the vessels do not interact that much with each other on their own. Each one is moving in its own to its own rhythm, to its own beat. What unifies them? A higher light that's higher than the. It's almost like a superimposed power. He's going to say this is what it says in Pasach Eliyahu, Antu the kosher line. You are the one that bonds them together. That means this is the level of the light that's higher than the sphirot, that bonds the spheros together. Also, this that they become unified with the Or Ein Sof, once they're fixed already, and each one when Chesed becomes Chesed, then it's already, positioning itself in its own position. So it's in a sense already beginning to separate itself from Or Ein Sof. So the sphere, but we know the spheres are not separated. They're not creations. They're emanations. But the very idea that they're still attached to the Or Ein Sof is because the light superimposes itself. The light that's not in the vessel superimposes upon these vessels and these lights to keep them in check. Their onus achtos and bond with the Or Ein Sof, what they Or Ha'elyon is through a light that's above them. Because now he's going to say, and this itself he's going to explain. Now he's going to show the difference between the three levels. When you go to the first level, the Shorshei Oires. Remember we said 1, 2, 3. The first letter is when the lights, the Essa Spherois, are still in the womb of the Or Ein Sof. Over there, when it's still included in the Or Ein Sof, over there, they're essentially one with the Or Ein Sof. There's nothing other than the Or Ein Sof. You can't even see these hidden spheres. All you see is Or Ein Sof. That's for sure, Baruch. Now, and even in the second stage, when the light comes out, the kav, when the light emerges, so after the tzimtzum, before they go into vessels, when they're still substanceless, without a sudden, they're also in a state of unified with Or Ein Sof, and that's why you feel only pshitos, simplicity. You don't feel definitions, you feel Ein Sof. But once they get invested in the vessels, even though then as well, they are a light that cleaves to its source, they're light, they're not kalim. So since they're light, remember, you have to remember, notwithstanding the fact that we're saying that the lights become tainted, we have to always remember that the level of taintedness of the light is far, 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 far above, way, way, way above the taintedness of the vessels. The vessels are far more fixed and defined than the light. So much so that the light is considered pashut. Even the light that's in the vessels is considered pashut compared to the vessels. That the 10 spheres of the lights, he says this in parentheses, is considered simple compared to the Essa sphere. The kalim themselves is where the real fixed is. But what he's saying is the light that goes into the vessels also become designed far less than the vessels themselves. Nevertheless, even though since they're davuk and they're makar, they're still in. Zahu, the very fact that they don't become completely swallowed in the vessel and they're still connected to Ein Sof and they still reflect the Ein Sof, that's because there is a higher power that keeps them constantly bottled to the Ein Sof and not running away and becoming something. In other words, their vessel themselves would pull them away. The reason they're not being swept completely pulled in and suctioned into their vessel, and the remaining lights that are connected to the source, Zawai they gili or elyon. It's almost like this powerful magnet that pulls them, keeps them above their own vessels. That affects them to be unified and to be integrated in their source. And how do we know that it's not due to them, it's due to a higher power? As it says in Pasach Aliyo, unto the kasha line. You bound them. That means there is them and there is the you. You are bonding them together. You are tying them. And you are unifying them. When it says them, what is it referring to? Not just the vessels, even the lights that are in the vessels. It's referring to the lights that have become vested in the vessels. Their bonding and their unification with the Or Ein Sof Baruch. And so too, their integration one with each other. Who are they? The antu the kasher. It's because you are bonding them. That means it's dependent on you, on Hashem Himself. However, once He bonds with them, they're in a level of light, not on a level of vessels. They're and the reason why they need an external factor, so to speak, to overwhelm them and keep them in check, That's because they become, once they go into vessels, they become b'pchinas metzius, k'fi mahus hakelim, like the substance of the vessels. The alkain, and therefore dafka ayedei or elyon. It's only through a higher light nasa behem abittel. This is what bittelizes them, nullifies them chulu, and that's how it is. Okay, this we concluded chapter 30. Maybe we'll chew over a little bit. This I did a little fast because I wanted to finish, but maybe we'll chew it over in the next class a little bit, and we'll do the kitzer in the next class, the summary, and we begin chapter 31. Mazel tov. Everyone should have a wonderful Shabbos.